Communication refers to the process by which information is transmitted and understood between two or more people. However, due to many communication barriers such as cross-cultural differences, perceptions, language problems, and personal interests, a lack of information or misinformation may occur. As a result, conflicts may arise which would have otherwise been prevented by effective communication. The consequences of such problems can also often be at least minimized by early intervention. In many businesses, not only is the transmission of business-related information essential for effective functioning of organizations, but also the communication between people in order to maintain positive interpersonal relations in the workplace. Our presentation will be focusing on the groupthink theory, the communication accommodation theory, and the Thomas Kilmann model in resolving and handling conflicts. We will discuss the empirical evidence supporting these theories and two case studies, a drug mart pharmacy case and the Sanlu milk contamination crisis in 2008.
Groupthink is a psychological phenomenon that ensues within a unit of people in which the desire for congruence or conformity in the group results in an illogical or dysfunctional decision-making outcome. Group members try to abate conflict and reach a consensus decision without critical assessment of coming up with alternative viewpoints. This is done by dynamically overturning non-conforming viewpoints and by insulating themselves from the outside influence. Originator or antecedent factors such as group cohesiveness, faulty group structure, and situational context, for example, community panic, play into the probability of whether or not groupthink will influence the decision-making process. Groupthink requires individuals to avoid fostering debatable subjects or alternative solutions. Ergo, there is a loss of individual originality, distinctiveness, and independent thinking. This is further induced by pressures from the group to conform. The dysfunctional group dynamics of the in-group produces an illusion of imperviousness. In other words, the group dynamics create an inflated certainty that the right decision has been made. Thus, the in-group significantly overestimates its own aptitudes in decision-making and considerably undervalues the aptitudes of its opponents. Furthermore, groupthink can produce desensitizing actions against opposing groups. Groupthink is a construct of social psychology but has an extensive reach and influences literature in the fields of communication studies, political studies, attitude within the workplace, and organization theory. Groupthink is most prominently stated to occur within natural groups within society, for example, the relatively different and contradictory mindsets of conservatives and liberal party factions. This is more commonly seen today within the divide occurring in the US between the two parties, which is influenced by group.
The article, The Tendency Toward Defective Decision-Making Within Self-Managing Teams, The Relevance of Groupthink for the 21st Century, by Gregory Moorhead, Christopher P. Neck, and Mindy S. West, posed the question, does Janice's groupthink have relevance to organizational members as we head into the 21st century? It explored groupthink within the workplace and its increasing presence due to self-managing teams. Self-managing teams, as defined by the article, are meant to integrate the workers' social needs and the technological needs of the organization. These teams are non-traditional as they have a pivotal role in determining both how their work is organized and performed. The paper found that the groupthink theory has validity in the 21st century and will continue to be valid as more organizations implement self-managing teams. It provided a foundation for future studies on this subject.
Communication accommodation theory was developed by Howard Ellis in 1973. It examines and emphasizes the adjustment of communications and behavior that a person uses language, speech, and nonverbal messages to accommodate others. There are two elements under the CAT theory. Convergence is a process on how individuals try to change their speaking styles to match another person where they are interacting with. When a person converges, he or she is often evaluated as more favorable as it helps people become more familiar with one another. People are acting this way because they have a strong need for social approval, and this is frequently from powerless individuals. Divergence is a process that individuals emphasize on the social and non-verbal differences as to differentiate oneself from the others. There are two reasons why people are acting this way. First one is to maintain their social identity. For example, you're the new person at work and may not wish to get grouped with the others. You choose to be polite but not accommodate. This helps you stand out and keep your identity, but may make others not like you. Another reason is to demonstrate the differences in power or roles held through those communication. This is easy to illustrate in the form of teacher, students, and manager-staff relationship.
For empirical evidence for our topic of communication and conflict, we decided to take a closer look at the Thomas-Kilmann conflict model, also known as TKI. This model was created by Kenneth W. Thomas and Ralph H. Kilmann in 1974 as an instrument to assess an individual's behavior in various situations of conflict. In conflict situations, we can use the mode via a self-report 15-minute test followed by a 1-hour analysis to describe an individual's behavior along 2 dimensions, which are assertiveness and cooperativeness. These 2 dimensions define 5 different modes for responding to conflict situations, which include competing, collaborating, compromising, avoiding, and accommodating. Both of these images display the 5 conflict handling modes in 2 different ways. Let's focus on the right-hand side image better to understand these modes. So as we can see in the top left corner, competing is assertive and uncooperative. In this situation, an individual expresses his own concerns at the other person's expense or simply trying to win. Accommodating in the bottom right corner is unassertive and cooperative. This is the complete opposite of competing, where an individual obeys another person's order. Avoiding in the bottom left-hand corner is unassertive and uncooperative. The individual simply does not deal with conflict. Jumping to the top right corner, collaborating is both assertive and cooperative. This involves the attempt to work with others to find a feasible solution. Lastly, in the center is compromising, which is moderate in both assertiveness and cooperativeness. This is seen as the middle ground solution that addresses many issues.
Conflict plays a detrimental role to group performance and creativity. Mental models and group consensus had led to the resulting idea that agreement within groups regarding information, ideas, and cognitive processes is a leading contributor to performance and outcomes. In our case study of the drug-marked workplace, there exists data conflict between Bob and Jack as both parties lack the information to ascertain each other's situation and position within the workplace. Jack's repetitive belatedness behavior had created a relationship conflict within the pharmacy as he sets a negative perception of the pharmacist for the associates. As Bob confronts the issue of Jack being late, he is uncooperative and ignores Jack's reasoning. This accommodates the TKI theory in the competing sense. Communication will play a critical role in constructive resolution. The communication impediment because of conflict asymmetry had left both parties to affect their relationships as well as the workplace, as customer service had been severely deteriorated. Bob had assumed that there had been a positive outcome through personal experiences with other resolutions, which indicates that conflict resolution is not a one-solution method. However, it takes analysis and an effective and repetitive communication exchange. The conflict perspective implies that the conflict is not only the sole impediment of a group functionality, but also the perception of each member and how it affects attitudes in the workplace. In this study, Bob views Jack in a negative manner and thus did not take the time to be compassionate and process Jack's reasoning.
Sanyu once was one of China's biggest dairy brands. However, they faced a contamination crisis in 2008 regarding their milk powder for infants. They received multiple reports for customers that their baby's urine contained solid matter after consuming its milk formula. In response to this, however, Sanyu avoided the issue of minimum contamination, choosing to use his influence with the media to cover this up from the public. Referring to the Thomas-Kilmann model, this method is both unassertive and uncooperative. The public were not informed of the problem, and consequently many were harmed as Sanyu continued to use its milk formula. Sanyu and other companies were eventually discovered for melamine contamination, but by the time the public were alerted, almost 300,000 babies were reported to have suffered kidney damage, and at least 6 died. Furthermore, China's powdered milk manufacturing industry, dairy industry, and the food industry as a whole suffered detrimental effects as there was a great increase of public distrust in dairy companies. Should Sanyu and other companies had alerted the public of the contamination as soon as they were informed, the damage would have been minimized.
In conclusion, we have found that conflict begins with a lack of clear communication. Also, communication is essential for conflict resolution, such in a way that individuals have different information and perceptions about the extent of conflict in the workplace, resulting in deteriorated relationships and group performance in the workplace. Organizations have the resources and knowledge to mitigate conflicts and allow for communication to effectively circulate through the workplace and improve outcomes. Thank you and good night.